Welcome to the Career Break 360 podcast, enabling you to break free from the corporate cubicle and do something sensational with your life. Today's podcast features Paul Archer on how to drive a London black cab up Mount Everest.
So this is basically a guide on how to drive a black cab up Mount Everest and some other useless tips. It's about driving around the world in a black cab. So I know there's not that many people here who are planning that. So it's not really that specific, but maybe you'll be able to gain some information about it. So a bit about myself. I'm Paul Archer. I'm one of the top 3 world's best international taxi drivers. There are only 3 of us, and we can't figure out who's the best. The arguments could go on for a long time. So I'm one of them, one of the 3 anyway. I'm not actually a taxi driver. I don't have a taxi license. I'm a pretty normal guy. I'm not a racing car driver. I'm not an ex-SAS badass who can drink water from camel's poo in the desert. I actually failed my driving test first time around when it comes to it. This wasn't something I dreamed of. I never spent hours dreaming as a 10-year-old about one day I will drive a London black taxi around the world. It's not one of those things you do. I thought I was going to be an astronaut or something. This is the point in these presentations where most people come up with a really inspirational quote. Generally, someone like Gandhi, or more often than not, it's Steve Jobs, and really motivating you. The problem is, the idea for where this expedition came from didn't come from inspirational people or anything like that. The inspiration came from Mr. Daniels, Mr. Carlsberg, Mr. Smirnoff. It just was booze. What came out of it? I mean, let's just be honest about it. No good idea came of sitting down and having a lemonade and a salad. This idea came from the pub. We had a couple of beers, sat in the back of a taxi, and we wondered, what's the longest ever taxi journey? What's the world record for the longest ever taxi journey? We looked it up, found out there's actually a world record to be broken, and we decided, yeah, we're going to do it. We thought this was fun. It was myself, 2 buddies, one guy called Jono Ellison, the other guy called Lee Purnell. And almost all the pictures you're going to see today were taken by Jono, so I've got to give him some credit for some of that. So what happened was, the next morning, woke up, fuzzy head, painful, just like, oh, I remember that thing. We're going to drive around the world in a taxi. And so I went up to my mate. I was like, yeah, come on, remember, this was good, the idea from last night. And he's like, what? This is a stupid idea. I mean, where are you going to plan it? I was like, I don't know, we'll go back to the pub. And then he's like, okay, well, how are we going to fund it? I was like, we'll get some sponsors. And it's like, we'll have a gimmick, we'll drive the longest route possible to, just to rack up the fare like all good taxi drivers do. And then it was just kind of things, well, how are we gonna get it to places? We'll put it on a ship. All these issues he started coming up with, but we had these solutions to them, kind of. Not really well thought through solutions, but they were solutions at the time when you sat there with a hangover in your dressing gown. However, some tip number 1 for anyone who's planning on driving a black cab around the world, don't plan it in the pub. That was a bad idea, straight away. 2, don't take the longest route around possible to rack up the fare, like all good taxi drivers. It's not funny at all. We found ourselves, having been driving for 6 months, back in France. 6 weeks, sorry, back in France. I'm going to show you the video now of our route, just so it should work, fingers crossed. It's loading on the laptop right now. This always goes wrong. Otherwise, I'll tell it and I'll act it out, maybe. I apologize. Oh, here we go. Yes, yeah, we drove off, went all the way into the Arctic Circle, headed back down into Europe, went to Moscow, we got arrested by police, we headed back down and went to Iraq, we went to Iran, went through Pakistan, into India, up through the Himalayas, up to Mount Everest, through China, down Southeast Asia, across Australia, from Sydney to San Francisco, across the United States, to New York, where we shipped back to London. And we actually went even further. We went all the way to Israel after New York, then we went to Moscow. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. The original idea from the taxi trip was actually to drive to Sydney. So we set off. It was only supposed to take 6 months. We started driving. This is us looking very young, fresh-faced. We bought this car on eBay. which isn't the wisest thing. We did a little bit of work on it. We got a few sponsors, but mainly we'd saved up quite a lot of cash from working hard, and we went off and we started driving, just me and my mates. No real experience, no real knowledge of taxis or anything. We went through to the north. We saw the northern lights. We got to play with snowmobiles, which are amazing. We got to go on husky rides, all of these things. We did a lot through couchsurfing, which is a fantastic service. When you're driving around and you send them a little email saying, hey, we're driving around the world in a black cab, can we come and stay? And they almost always say, yes, come on, we've got a big plan for you. We'll always take you out and have an adventure. But day to day, we'd be driving in and out. These are some of the roads in Russia when the snow was melting, the mud was coming up. The car there, you can see, is an absolute state. Then other times, you'd just be driving along. The sun would rise in our tents. We'd just pull up anywhere, basically, with no real plan to where we'd stay until we got there. Sometimes we'd be couch surfing, sometimes we'd just pitch our tents, sometimes we'd get stuck in the mud, couldn't drive any further that evening and put our tents there. Food was just like that, side of the road. You just pull over to whatever restaurant there is, and you just gesticulate that you need food, and food sometimes arrives, other things sometimes arrive. You never know what it's going to be, but it's always fun. And then you get to hang out with people like these. These guys are Georgian nobility. Also, they told us, we actually met them in a shipping container in a car park, but they told us they were Georgian nobility, and then they fed us homemade brandy, and I can't remember anything else after that. But as you drive along, things happen, adventures come. We ran out of fuel here. We had to get this guy who was a local bus driver to siphon it out of his bus. We went through India. There's the Taj Mahal. There's some Indians, just to prove it. Went through Southeast Asia. That is in Angkor Wat, and that is us sitting there to prove it with the taxi that we did make it through there. We made it to Australia. And this is the point. This is what we wanted to do. It was London to Sydney, and we got there. This was probably about 10 months in. But I'm going to rewind you a little bit to about maybe 8 months in. We were in Cambodia, and we got this email from this fella called Nimrod, which I thought was a bit odd anyway, with a name like that. He kept trying to add one of the guys on Facebook, and he looked at it and he was like, I don't know an Israeli called Nimrod, so he declined his Facebook ad. Eventually, the guy got in touch with us and said, hello, my name is Nimrod. I run a big company, and I'd like to pay for you to go all the way back again. And we were like, well, this is a con. This is obviously one of our mates at home taking the piss out of us doing it. But we investigated a bit more, and it actually turned out that he was telling the truth. He was part of a company called Get Taxi, who have an app where you can hail taxis from, and they were a startup with more money than sense, and they wanted to give us some more of that money. So we said yes, of course. I mean, who's going to say no to that? So we did, and the plan was actually, they said, we want you to drive back again from Australia, back through Asia all the way to India, and we said, no way. It's not going to happen. We'd die, the car would die, or someone would die, something was going to die at some point. It just wasn't good. But we said, well, how about we go across the States, and back then. So he said yes. So this is what we did. We crossed it out. We went from London to London again. So we got it to Sydney. That's us in Sydney, to prove it. Triumphant, hands in the air, just to show how happy we are. And then we went to America. And one of our buddies here, he's called John. We met him in Pakistan. Genuinely, this guy's just an American who was hanging out in Pakistan in full local garb, and we made friends with him. When he heard we were coming to the States, he said, can I come? And we said, well, and we were joking when we said this, only if you buy yourself a New York yellow taxi. So he did. And John came and drove across the States. We actually went and bought this in Pasadena in LA from some Armenian gangsters at 2 a.m., but that's another story going on for that. We shot some guns. We ate some burgers. We got to Times Square. When we were there, we were fortunate enough that the Wall Street Journal picked up our story and wanted to cover it, and it just kept on moving up. And then this morning it came out, and it was on their front page. So we were driving around New York, and everyone's like, what the hell? It was like we were like stars for like 5 minutes. It was great. And then from there, we went to Israel because we had to, and the Israelis hate this picture. We then drove up to Moscow, had a drag race with a Russian taxi, And then we got back to London again. And when we were there, once we got back again, we were lucky enough to be invited to take part in the closing ceremony of the Olympics. So that's kind of a nutshell of the taxi trip. We're going to go back to some of the tips. Don't buy a taxi on eBay. Really, really, really bad idea. Here's some of the reasons. It broke down all the time. You see us a lot there. We've got our tops off. When you're in India or Pakistan or Iran or somewhere like that and your car breaks down, there's a very hot engine in there and you're supposed to be fixing it. It's really, really hard work. London taxis aren't very good, and I hope there's no cabbies here who will argue this, but they'll probably agree with me. The whole chassis had rusted loose, and parts of the bodywork here had fallen off, the lights had fallen off, and we were concerned that the wheel was about to fall off. And luckily it didn't fall off until the day after this picture was taken. It was really, really in a bad way, and this was mainly because of the monsoon in India. Basically made the whole thing rust, fall apart, the electrics were gone, everything was gone. The suspension was a nightmare. So, don't buy a black cab from eBay. Number 4, you can't just put a taxi on a container ship, as was the original idea. This doesn't work like this. It's not easy. Or sometimes you can just put it on, but it's when you arrive there you get the troubles. The amount of paperwork you've got with shipping a car. This is actually us arriving triumphant in Australia to find that even though we'd paid a professional to clean it like 3 or 4 times before we left, they still found it too dirty to go in and find us lots of money and then held it for 2 weeks and all sorts of things. And we're also still in trouble with the American customs because they wouldn't release our car and we had to steal it back from the warehouse. But don't tell them that I'm here or anything like that. So, and you've got to see the funny side of everything. This is tip 5 now. We were away for 15 months. There's 3 guys cooped up in a tin can. It was hot, it was sweaty, and God did it smell. The thing is, we're still good buddies now, and I think that was because of the approach we took to this. We knew we were going to have arguments. They were going to happen. You know, what we did was we had a mentality of just expecting these arguments to come, have the arguments, and then like the day after, you're mates again. You know, it's kind of like a sibling relationship. And also the other side was just this mentality of just everything's funny. I mean, I don't know how that got there. That's just an Iraqi electrical appliance shop. All right, okay, so here's a Chinese toilet. It's just great because you're looking yourself, which side is it? You obviously don't want to interrupt anyone. But actually, I had a look inside just because I figured the lads would be more disgusting than the girls, but I just couldn't tell a difference. They were both foul. Find a tank, play on it, because we are 10-year-old little boys at heart when it boils down to it. If you park your car up at night in an Iraqi street that's completely empty, and you find the next morning that they've used your car as an integral part of the market, you buy some of the goods. This is an Arnie Schwarzenegger workout DVD quality. Number 6, don't get deported from Iran. Top tip that. Hold on to that. But actually, Iran itself is a fantastic country I wanted to talk about a little bit. In it, you hear a lot about the government and how oppressive it is, and I've got a little list here of things you're not actually allowed to do. So you're not allowed to discuss politics, watch Western movies, watch Westerns movies, wear necklaces, drink alcohol, wear bell-bottom trousers, talk to people from the opposite sex who aren't in your family, be gay, own a dog, have sex, be American, dress provocatively, show your hair if you're a girl, or, most importantly, have a mullet. No one's allowed to have a mullet haircut. So obviously you're pretty restricted with your hairdos and all sorts of things that you do there. You've got to find different ways of entertaining yourself. And this is what young Iranians do. They get in their car and they drive. The motorways are great. The roads are fantastic in this country. And they drive up in the fast lane, pull into the center reservation, half in the fast lane, half on the reservation, take out a beautiful Persian rug, put on a hookah pipe, get some food out, some snacks, turn the volume up in the car full blast, and have a picnic for a few hours and hang out. Interesting if you're trying to drive along the fast lane, but for them, they're having a great time. The other thing also is crystal meth. Apparently, Iran has one of the worst crystal meth problems imaginable because there used to be big problems with with opium, but then with the wars in Afghanistan, the price went up for that, and crystal meth started coming to it, which is a fact. I don't know if it's true, but it's certainly unusual. With Iranians, they're Persians as well. I'm sure that some people here may have been to the country before, but don't call them Arabs or make any distinctions between, make any associations between Arab countries and Iran, because they get very offended. But like this is Jono and some girls. This is generally how he tries to enjoy his time. But you can see that the girls all have to cover their hair, and they have to wear this awful coat which covers any of their figure sort of shape, sizes of it. But what's fascinating underneath that is actually they've got amazingly coiffured hair, they've got a face thick with makeup, they've got skinny jeans on and shiny tops on, all underneath this, which as soon as they go into their homes, it all comes off, and they're just like anyone else. They like to chat and flirt, as you can see here. And in fact, the only person who flirts more than the teenage girls in Iran are the teenage boys in Iran, who just are really, really unique. This guy, we found him in the desert. He was hitched a ride with us to a Zoroastrian temple, and actually turned out he has just had heart surgery and checked himself out from hospital, and we think he was going there to die, which was a bit concerning. He had a massive patch there on his chest where he just had surgery. He still had the band around his wrist. He had ECG pads still attached to him, and he sat there smoking. And ironically, we still had the no smoking stickers in the taxi at the time, and he was just sat there, or just annoyed that we didn't get that in the picture. But he sat there smoking and shouting abuse at me for not driving fast enough, and I was like, this seriously is how fast this goes. Like, it doesn't go any faster than this. Very interesting. But it's a beautiful, beautiful country. This is in Esfahan, the bridge over, just stunningly well lit, really nice, laid-back place to hang out. Driving, good roads, interesting drivers. But some of the places are just beautiful. This is a town called Yazd, which is straight out of the Bible or something. It does genuinely look like that. There's no larger high-rise blocks or anything like that, and this is in the middle of the desert. Really, really interesting place, really hot, but just really nice. Just love these two little kids, and they do it. Now the desert, this brings me on to it. It's quite deserted in its nature because it's a desert. Sometimes you'll find something like this, which is a sand fort which has been there for like 1,000 years or something, and they're just using it to farm goats inside of it. But other than that, there's nothing there. So one evening when we were driving along in the dark, we pulled off from the main motorway, well-lit motorways, into the desert, the deserted desert where there's nothing there. We drove along for about 500 meters, 1,000 meters, parked up, and we camped. And this was good until the next morning when I woke up to my mate Lee saying, "Is that an artillery gun?" And so I poked out, and it was. We'd accidentally camped in an artillery field. And I'm sure you can see there that that's an easy enough mistake to make. But there's the guns, big guns, very easily spotted, but not in the dark. So we realized we were in quite a predicament. This is not the kind of place you want to be, three British lads in a London black cab with British plates, camping in an Iranian artillery field which is built to protect their nuclear facility from attack from Israel. So we packed up sharpish, but just as we're just about to leave, a 4x4 comes up, and then another one comes up, and it's all right when they come out with the uniforms on. It's when they come out without the uniforms on and you realize that they're the secret police and you are in the shit. And so we actually got away with that for that day, but eventually down the line, I ended up getting deported because of that. That's another story. Right, number 7, abide to the cardinal rules of Pakistan. Anyone here ever been to Pakistan? Brilliant, lovely, lovely place, isn't it? Really great. A little bit scary sometimes, but lovely. But when we were there, the guidebook, if you're going to read it, has 3 things it says. Don't go out after dark, avoid crowds, and don't bring attention to yourself. When we were there, we found this, we were invited to a Sufi festival, which was a really great opportunity to take, so we decided to sack off all of those rules and go out after dark. When we got there, we tried to keep it low profile until we were spotted, and they invited us on stage. in front of a very large crowd, which was actually one of the best nights I've had in a very long time. Really interesting. Just a culture which is so far away, so different, and so fascinating. Driving through Pakistan, not a safe place, a bit scary. Armed guards through most of Baluchistan, which is a particularly scary stretch of the world. But we wanted to blend in. So we had to avoid the Taliban and all this kind of stuff. So we watched BBC News and Al Jazeera, and everyone we saw in there had beards. So we grew beards. As you can see, they're not the best beards in the world, but they're beards. And we thought we'd get away with it until we got there. They all have moustaches. So we really looked weird. The other thing we did was we covered all our stickers up so we could blend in because we wanted to be really nice and subtle. I think we got away with it. Definitely blending in very well there. So tip number 8, you've got to enjoy the driving. Because if you don't, you probably shouldn't be driving around the world anyway. With this one, sometimes the roads are bad. They are really bad. You're bumping around. I mean, India, as far as I can see, is just a series of potholes joined together. In Russia, it's a series of really nice roads and then massive ditches that'll eat a car, which you're going full speed towards, and you've got to slam on your brakes. But it's an adventure, it's fun, it's interesting, it keeps you buzzing, these sort of things. As we went along there, I mean, this picture here is taken in Laos. The roads sometimes are really bad, and when you're driving a two-wheel drive London taxi, it can be a bit of a challenge. But then, sometimes the roads are flat, and you're like, yes, at least they're not bumpy. And then sometimes, you get roads like this, which are just pretty cool anyway. Right, so tip number 9, so we've got 2 left there for it. Don't drive a black cab up Mount Everest. This is a taxi. Oh. This is the taxi. This is Mount Everest. In this picture, the taxi is bigger than Mount Everest, but don't let that fool you. Mount Everest is really big, really big. Actually, 100 kilometers off-road uphill at about 4,500 meters big, and cars don't work very well. Taxis especially, well, they work anyway, but taxis really don't work at that altitude. But we made it. Yes, this is us at base camp of Mount Everest, and we set a new world record for the highest ever taxi journey until 3 days later when we drove even higher than that on a pass, which was unexpected. But this is cool. We were there. We made it. But just to be allowed to drive in Tibet, you have to have your Chinese driving license. We actually drove through all of China, so you have to do that, which involves taking the dreaded Chinese driving test, which is in Chinese. And for some reason, only I got tested for the 3 of us. If one of us passed, then everyone passed. And we got there, and I sat with this very lovely Chinese policewoman who spent most of her time spitting, which was a bit gross. But she was doing that, and then basically she spoke, well, she could only count to 7. She never figured out 8 or 9 or 10. I told them to her a few times, but she always stumbled. She was like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. And this is how it goes along. And then I only spoke 3 words of Chinese, which is hello, which is ni hao, I think. Someone who speaks Chinese, please apologize for my accent. The other one is thank you, which is xi or xie. And then the other one, really important to us, is diesel, which is chai yon, which we learned, which I said to her. She counted as 7, and I said, diesel, hello, thank you. And then she was like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Diesel, hello. And I drove. She was obviously focusing so hard, thinking what number 8 was, she didn't notice I was driving on the wrong side of the road for a period of time, which was good. And she granted us. I have a Chinese driving license and Chinese number plates, which is pretty cool. And it meant you get to drive to places like this, which is fantastic. Tibet is probably one of my favorite places we've been in the whole trip. It's just unbelievably beautiful. Really, really stunning. China, again, great roads, terrible driving. India, terrible driving, terrible roads. Pakistan, terrible driving, pretty terrible roads. Really, really interesting. It's amazing how this is what you remember of a country. You don't think the people or the scenery, you think the roads, because it's so important when you're driving a car and you're constantly being bounced around the place or dodging cars and this kind of thing. So, tip number 10, there's always a solution. So when I said to John at the beginning, let's drive around the world in a black cab, and he came up with lots of problems, and we came up with some really, really terrible solutions, but they were solutions at the very least. You know, I can now fix a black cab in the desert, which is a skill set I'll never use. But I can't fix any other cars. I can just fix that car because it broke, and you looked long and hard at it for long enough, and you eventually find a solution. You figure out what's broken because it's got a crack through it, or it's hanging off, or it's down the road that way. And then you figure out a way of bolting it back on again. You know, I can't fix them. A great example of this was actually these brakes in Laos. This piece here holds the brake pads in, and it fell off somewhere. The roads are pretty bumpy there, so we had no brakes, and not even that, the brakes had jammed on. So we had to fix it, or we were stuck in the jungle indefinitely, which my mum would not like. Mum, I'm in Laos for the rest of my life. I can't get out. My brakes are broken. So we figured out a way of fixing it, which meant we just cut an old Coke can into a rough shape, and then we shoved it in there, and that would work until we got to a mechanic. And actually, it worked for another 2,000 miles, because we never changed it. And it was still there when we thought, oh, God, weren't we supposed to change that piece of Coke can we fixed the brake with? And we did when we got to Australia, because it was really, really dodgy. But the thing is, you can figure out a solution to it. And if you can't figure out a way of logically fixing it with a Coke can or something similar, you just hit it with a hammer. Try WD-40, bit of duct tape, always works. Works a really, really good charm. And actually trying to get into Laos, there's a lot of sort of situations when you do have to fix things. It's not necessarily about the car, it's about your traveling, and you're not able to get into the country that well because the border guards are trying to get a bribe from you, for example. What we did was we challenged them to a game of volleyball to get into the country, because they shut the border, they wouldn't let us through. But they thought they were game, thought this was fun. We'll play them at volleyball. We win, we go through. They win, we spend the night on the border, or pay them more money to open it. And then we sat down there, we got there ready to play volleyball, and we realized that we don't know how to play volleyball. This is the worst deal in the world. So we stole their ball and ran away with it and bribed them with their ball. So you've got to be a bit creative about these things. So when Jono said that all these problems were there, and we wanted to find the solutions to it, we did. We found pretty poor solutions sometimes, found some good solutions. We were lucky with sponsorship, but that wasn't the be-all and end-all of it. You know, we worked hard on it. We saved a lot of money up. We got lots of people involved to help us out. So many favors from so many great people. It meant we actually made it. We got there. We got back to London after 15 months on the road with 2 world records. We'd driven 42,000 miles, which doesn't sound like a huge amount of distance, but when some days you average only about 80 miles per day, or less, it does kind of add up. The meter was on the entire way, and it was about, I think it was 79,000 pounds 100 all the whole way if you were to leave your meter on there. And we raised over £20,000 for the British Red Cross. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for it.
You have been listening to the Career Break 360 podcast, brought to you by CareerBreak360.com for all your career break and travel needs.